Keynote speech is my boss, the Undersecretary for the Trade and Investment Promotions Group of the Department of Trade and Industry, Undersecretary Ponciano C. Manalo Jr. Undersecretary Manalo was appointed as Undersecretary of the Department of Trade and Industry's Trade and Investment Promotions Group on the 21st of March 2013. He formerly held executive level positions for Colgate-Palmolive Company in various countries including Europe, United States, and the Philippines, where he's in charge of designing, developing, and implementing countrywide strategic marketing initiatives for the company. His last stint was as the Global Director of Hill's Pet Nutrition USA in Topeka, Kansas, a global subsidiary of Colgate-Palmolive Company. Prior to Colgate-Palmolive, he was also Assistant Brand Manager for Procter & Gamble Philippines. He is a graduate of the Management Engineering at the Ateneo de Manila University. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present my boss, Undersecretary Manalo.
Thank you, Mike. Do you have the clicker? For the...
And the clicker.
So how do I get the slide? Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat.
Sa inyo naman.
The Honorable Deputy Consul General, Jaime Escalon, there he is. Dr. Penny Lachanco, President of the HIMOAP, Mr. Benedict Hernandez. These are people you will hear from later in the morning. Mr. Jojo Ligan, Executive Director of the CCAP. Where's Jojo? There he is. Dr. Gerald Osmond, from Chief Medical Officer of EXL, whom I had the occasion to speak to before this morning, and is a repository of a lot of knowledge on the industry. So thank you very much for your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Philippine Consulate in San Francisco, magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat, and thank you very much for being here. Have a slide, please. The Philippines is no longer the sick man of East Asia, but the rising tiger. There is macroeconomic stability, and the fiscal situation of the government is sound and improving. The fight against corruption is being waged with determination, and it is paying off. Transparency is improving everywhere in the Philippines. These are not my words. These are the words of Motoo Kunishi of the World Bank, Director of the Philippines. The Philippines, the President in his speech, in the video presentation, said there is no better time to invest in the Philippines as it is today. And as a member of government representing the Department of Trade and Industry, I also tell you that there is no better time to invest than now in the Philippines. I've worked in industry, the private sector, for a great number of my life. And most of my career, I have worked with private industry in packaged goods. And through my life, I've sold products here and there. And it has been my personal principle that I will not sell any product I do not believe in. I moved to government 6 months ago because I do firmly believe in the product I'm selling today, which is the Philippines in and of itself. So be proud that you're part of this investing public. Slide, please. We have just been given an extra stamp of approval by the ratings agencies in the world. The first three Standard & Poor's, Fitch Ratings, and Japan Credit Agency were mentioned in the video. As we were doing a roadshow in England 2 weeks ago, Moody's, which is situated in England, gave their ratings as well from BA1, which is below investment grade, to BAA3 for the Philippines. But that is that is nothing compared to what it means, because what it means is not just a ratings upgrade, but they gave a positive outlook for the Philippines for the next 3, 4, 5 years. But it's a positive outlook for investments in the Philippines. What is important to note with what's happening in our country today is that there is stable and resilient economic growth when you look at two important numbers in your economic indicators. One, of course, is the GDP growth, which has grown to 7.5%, which economists like Secretary Balisacan from the NEDA has projected to be sustained over the next 2 to 3 years. But more important than that is that headline inflation is at 2.8% in the comparative periods of GDP growth. But that is a very difficult combination to achieve: high gross domestic product growth and low inflation. That difference is astounding. You would expect inflation to be higher or the other way around. But what we have achieved is, in fact, a divergence of two readings in the economy that is really makes us indicate the economic growth that we have in the country. What is the reason for this? Well, we have a few theories, a few analyses. One, of course, is the continuous inflow of OFW, overseas foreign workers, remittances. We estimate that to have been, or we record that to be 21.4 billion in 2012. And it will probably be about 25 billion in the next 2 to 3 years. Remittances drew strength from demand for skilled workers, skilled professional Filipinos abroad, along with better data and capture through banks and financial institutions which have been done. But anyone who is working with Philippine industry, everyone who is in the export business will agree that one of the biggest advantages that the Philippines has is its Filipino workforce. The commitment, the loyalty, pagsisikap, tiyaga, and the love of family, the love of God, has always been a very strong tenet in the Filipino worker, which is better, I might say, than any other worker comparatively anywhere you look at in Asia or in the world. Whether it is a domestic worker in the Middle East, whether it's a factory worker in Malaysia, factory worker in Indonesia, an expatriate in private industry, or a top position in management or board level, the Filipino is always outstanding. Which has led to improved global competitiveness ratings. This is an update from what you had seen. The World Economic Forum has given us a +6 rating. I don't have to go through the chart, but you get +10 and +5 and +10 in terms of the ratings that we've had over the last 2 or 3 years, which again is an astounding result and really talks to the good governance which the government has had over the last 3 years as a major program. Resultantly, we have exports growth at about growing in 2012 about 7.6%. And I focus here on the industry we're talking about this morning, which is services exports, where we have in the first half of 2013 sustained growth up by 6.2% versus a year ago. Almost exactly the same as half of what we did last year, which means we expect even higher growth in services exports, your industry, in the next 6 months to go. When you look at investments in the Philippines, investments grew in 2012 by 2.3%, and in 2013, first half, it has grown by 36.6%. These are FDI approved investment inflows by BOI and the PESA. But what's more important to look at is the percentage of foreign investments in the country has been at 32.2%, up significantly from 12.2% in the first half of 2012. And when you look at the growth in foreign investments, it's grown by almost 2 times, or 1.48%, the growth that we had in the past years. Where have these investments been coming from? Basically from the manufacturing sector, which is good news for all of us. In electricity, gas, real estate. And our top sources in 2012 has been from the Netherlands, Japan, USA, Singapore, and South Korea. May I make a footnote though, when you look at Netherlands, the investment source from foreign investment in the Netherlands is really due to the oil exploration activities of Shell. So that is a big number in of itself. When you look at our top source of foreign investment, you're really looking at Japan on a steady basis, on a year-on-year basis. Japan, the United States, and Singapore in that order, if you took the Netherlands factor of Shell out of the equation. Some notable foreign investments in the Philippines today, I name a few. Del Monte has a $60 million investment in Maguindanao for a 3,000 hectare banana plantation that will employ 4,500 workers. Holcim in Switzerland, additional investment of $450 million on a cement plant. This is investment in the last 1 to 1.5 years. Mexico's FEMSA Mexico acquired Coca-Cola Bottling Corporation at almost $700 million, representing 51% of the total company's value at $1.35 billion. And Itochu, Japan, had bought Dole Food Company in the amount of US $1.7 billion. As you recall, Dole USA sold its equity to Itochu Japan in 2012 to focus, and Dole US is now focusing on the US operations. We also have investments that we don't see here in terms of investments by Unilever, companies like Unilever. We did expansion activity in the same year. We also have buyouts of Coca-Cola, purchases of Coca-Cola shares in coconut water companies, and PepsiCo in coconut water companies, which they bought in equity, close to about $500 million in both investments. So I did not include that. So what's the Philippine advantage? What is happening in our country today? When you look at what's happening, we have at the BOI defined these areas as priority areas for investments. You have on the first column there, these are the different areas where we give incentives, tax holidays, on a year-in basis. And it's a long list that we have there. And the second chart there, you have export activities, which are priority areas for us. Services exports falls into that area which you represent here. When you look at exports, what are the export activities? Chart, please. What are the export, and I'll go back to the investment areas later on. What are the export activities? Chart, please. What are the export activities that have been growing in the last year? For those of you who are interested in export activity, of course, the first one is agricultural crops. And why is agricultural crops important to the country? Because it is one of the biggest avenues for what the President has called inclusive growth. When you work with agriculture or agro-industrial activity, the farmers are able to produce crops, products, and that takes care of a wide portion of the population involved in agricultural farming, the farm-to-market activity in terms of those that sell in the market. So you can see the amount of expanse that agricultural crops would give in terms of exports. So when you export products, you help actually get inclusive growth. One of the products that is in marine area is seaweed products. The Philippines controls the production of a seaweed variety available only in what they call the Coral Triangle. And the Coral Triangle is the area of water between the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, where this variety of seaweed is available, and this is transformed into a process into carrageenan. How many of you know what carrageenan is? For those of you who are not aware of carrageenan, carrageenan is an emulsifier or a blender for food products. If you ate the sausage in the buffet table this morning, the only reason why it is sticking together is because it contains carrageenan. The Philippines has a monopoly. The Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia has a monopoly of the seaweed used to process that product. So we are gifted, in fact, by seaweed products of that variety to produce carrageenan, the only place that produces it in the world. Coconuts. Coconuts, the United States coconuts is the #1 agricultural purchase by the United States. Coconuts in any form, coconut water, desiccated coconut, copra, is being imported by the United States in large quantities, and that is a #1 crop or product being sold in the United States. It continues to grow despite its maturity. We've gone from simple copra products. Now we are into more value-added products such as coconut water, coconut flour, coconut oil, products along the coconut coconut products that have now been growing at enormous rates in the country today. So if you're looking for export opportunities, coconut products are definitely one of them. And of course, wood-based products. We manufacture the chair or the table that you're probably eating in your house tonight, or the restaurant probably was manufactured from the Philippines. We are a #1 manufacturer in Cebu of products like Dedon for Europe. You will see Dedon in Soho in New York. They have a nice shop there, but we manufacture furniture for Dedon. I just came from the Manila Fame. For those of you who are not familiar with Manila Fame, it is the biggest furniture and accessory show that we have in the Philippines. And we feature designers and furniture makers of all ages and of all types. And we have today exciting designs of furniture and wood-based products that is now being used around the world. North Carolina is a big importer of Philippine-made products, furniture products. Next chart. I took a chart here and I said, what are the most relevant products or areas of investment and export for the United States? In the first column, I put investment areas, creative industries, knowledge-based services. That is very, very important to us because the United States is a big importer of creative services and outsourced services for creative services in the Philippines. Aerospace. In the Philippines today, we have Lufthansa Techniques, we have Singapore Airlines, we have Moog, we have BAE Aerospace. These are all companies that are catering to the aerospace industry. BAE Aerospace manufactures all the Airbus galleys and toilets. If you see those molds, they manufacture that. It's now made in the Philippines. Moog makes aircraft parts. Lufthansa Techniques and Singapore Airlines have their facilities for what we call MRO, manufacturing, maintenance, repair and overhaul of engines and airplanes. So the Philippines-based location is becoming a hub for the aerospace industry. And pretty soon we're making big bids for Europe and the United States to have a piece of the aerospace business. The aerospace business, or the airplane, and domestic and international traffic for airline travel is expected to increase in Asia by double digits in the next 5 to 10 years. Retail, infrastructure. There was a mention of PPP in the presentation video which I brought this morning. PPP is means private-public partnership. It is the opportunity of the private enterprise to bid for public projects and become part of those public projects for rebalance and repay to the Philippines, to the government, by the government at a later time. Financing is available now. A lot of projects have been done. And the projects are not only limited to roads and bridges. We have recently awarded projects for school buildings. There will be about 66 new school buildings projected to be built in the Philippines by the first quarter of 2012. And that has been through the public-private partnership. Hospitals is also part of that. And of course, bridges, roads and bridges, and repair, maintenance, and construction of the MRT facilities, or the light rail transit facilities. The first 3 projects that have been awarded. Green projects, tourism, hospital, which is why we're here, medical services, disaster prevention, mitigation and recovery projects. That is a big project that we are looking at, investment projects. We are looking for investors in the Philippines because, as you know, we are very susceptible to disaster, to typhoons, in some areas earthquakes, in many areas earthquakes, and the ability to provide investment in these areas and services in these areas is very big for us. I'm a personal fan of research and development. The more research and development that's brought into the country, the more manufacturing can be brought out of the country as well. So I saved that for the last, because the investment areas that in fact the US, being a big R&D center of excellence, may be able to do in the Philippines. On the export activities, I have listed down, of course, export products of food, processed foods, or even unprocessed foods as a major export item from the Philippines. But more importantly, the services export business, of which we are here today, is an area that we should also look at. We are big in voice and non-voice areas, but we would like to look at healthcare, we would like to look at engineering design, animation and game development and software development are infant areas that we would like to really be participative on. And the United States, again, is a center of excellence for animation, game development, and software development. On software development, the whole software development industry is $300 billion worth. Philippines only has $1.5 billion of the $300 billion, which is very, very, very small. We are nothing in the software development area, but we turn out 470 graduates every year. We turn out 100,000 engineering graduates every year. So there's a big opportunity gap that we need to fill in that area. Why the Philippines? Its strategic business location. The country is placed at the crossroads, in fact, of international shipping and airlines. We are within 3 to 4 hours of anywhere in Asia, and we are within 11 to 12 hours of anywhere in Europe or the United States. The country's location is an entry point for 500 million people in the ASEAN market. There are 100 million Filipinos, and as ASEAN becomes a reality in 2015, we realized that the Philippines can be a gateway for 400 million other people who live in ASEAN. And not only that, with ASEAN and because of the ASEAN +1 free trade agreements that we have in place, it can also be a gateway not only for the Philippines 100 million and the 400 million in ASEAN, but for 1 billion plus in China, because we have an ASEAN +1 China free market access agreements existing today. We have a big program on infrastructure build-up. I noted 3 projects that have been started up. As an economy develops further, as an economy builds, as you get the same growth rates, GDP growth in the country, it is inevitable that infrastructure development will happen. I was asked recently by a member of the press in the Philippines and asked me if it was my money and if I was going to invest in the Philippines personally, which area would I go into? And without batting an eyelash, I said, I'd go into infrastructure development. Because I know that in the next 3 to 4 years, I know it will be a big demand area for the Philippines. Not only that, I know that the transparency that's been developed in this area in the country has been far more mature than it ever has been in the last 3 years, having been vetted in the last 3 years. And moving forward, I know I can have a fair shake in infrastructure projects if I went into it. Of course, it is not a secret, the Philippines has a first-class lifestyle. It is a second home to expatriates who enjoy the company of the warmest people in the region and the openness. It is also accessible and affordable to luxuries, value for money housing. Everybody knows that. Modern recreational facilities, business centers, churches, hospitals are under international standards. And of course, it is a growing favorite tourist destination by many foreigners and many Filipinos alike. You don't have to be a foreigner to enjoy the Philippines. We have a very rich talent pool, highly educated, strongly customer service oriented, adaptable to universal cultures. Commitment and loyalty are tops among Filipinos working in any industry. As I mentioned, we churn out 470 college graduates per year. IT, science, engineering, we have 100,000 plus every year churned out by the school system. We have just changed our school system to the universal school system of K to 12. And for the future, that will be from K to 10, which is what we had before. That is a major step in developing education at that level. And if you look at the medical area, there's 73,000 medical technologists, doctors, nurses that graduate from the school system in the Philippines every single year. But my words are nothing really. My words are just about 15 minutes of talk. For those of you who have not been to the Philippines, I encourage you to plan a visit to the Philippines. It is the only way to experience what it's like to be there, to be located in the Philippines. It's the only way for you to be able to understand that your investment will be safe and everything that is being talked about in terms of governance and in terms of credit ratings will be felt by those if you plan a visit to the Philippines. And while you're there, you have to enjoy some tourism, because in fact, when you look at everything considered, it's always more fun in the Philippines. And so with that, I really encourage everybody, despite your busy schedules, to come and visit the Philippines and experience what it's like. For those of you who are from the Philippines, it's always a good time to come home. There's never a better time but now. So thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take a couple or a few. Questions that I may not have covered or I have glossed over as I was speaking. Yes, sir.
Charlie for the man. What is the current mindset of government towards rationalizing the 60/40 law? 60/40, the investment ownership ratio.
You're talking about equity, or are you talking about land ownership, or both?
Both.
Let me start with the land. Let's start with land. The Philippine government today, that is a constitutional requirement. So the constitutional requirement requires more, a constitutional convention, an amendment by Congress by big leaps and bounds. So that's a difficult sell to do. Ownership is only available for foreigners at, they cannot own 100% of property unless for certain qualifications, for example. You can own property of less than 5,000 square meters as a foreigner, 100% if you're an enterprise. If you're a private individual, you can own property, I believe, up to 1,000 square meters. You can own a condominium, and you can, as a foreigner in the Philippines, and register such. So there are areas where you can own property 100%, but by and large, for big agricultural tracts, you cannot own property 100%. It cannot be foreign owned. That is in the Constitution. We have on the equity ownership, we have the EO226, which defined a negative list for certain industries that required 100% equity by Filipinos, 60/40, and so on down the line. Most of the 100% equity required positions are sensitive areas, like owning ammunition, guns, media, and that remain. Anything beyond that, including practice of profession, it's been reviewed. In February of this year, a full review was submitted to the President. Was submitted by a group of NEDA individuals, not to the President, I stand corrected. And within this list, it has been reduced almost to just simple, not simple, but to areas of sensitive areas like ammunition and all that stuff. Defense-related activity, ownership of media are those that have been kept as not to be foreign owned, but the rest of it, and certain practice of professions, no, Angie, have been relegated to a still strict non-foreign ownership, but the list in of itself has been relaxed, and the list. A recommendation was submitted to the Secretary, and we will submit that to the Congress for this congressional year, and it should be acted on. It's one of the priority areas that will be acted on, including the investment incentives reform that is being proposed to the Philippine Congress. So there's progress there. There's been work done. There's a lot of staff work that's been done. The Secretary is scheduled to approve that, I think, last August, but I'm not sure if he had approved it for presentation to the Congress. So that's where it is. So the question is, the short answer then, therefore, is there are certain segments and categories that we are not going to move in foreign ownership on 60/40 or 100% zero, but everything else, there's a relaxation, including retail trade. Today, retail trade, you have to have equity of $2.5 million paid up equity to be able to set up a foreign retail and be 100% foreign owned in the Philippines. There is a proposal to bring that down to $500,000 paid up. It is not yet passed in Congress, but there is a proposal to bring that down, the foreign equity to 100% under those certain circumstances. There are other circumstances. So I think that the overall question to your answer to your question is yes, it's being relaxed. There's the 60-40, the 100-0. The only thing we cannot really work at today is ownership of land, although there are certain areas where land can be owned depending on the qualification that you have. Yes, sir.
Layman Jones, I just noticed a little verb in the news about the Philippines applying to have a no-duty relationship with Europe. With Europe, and I just wondered what the advantages are for that.
Okay. You may be referring to a few things, okay, which I can tell. First of all, the very most common one, probably the recent one that you may have read about, is our application for what we call GSP Plus, which is almost similar to the GSP. They call it GSP, but I don't even know what GSP means, but I know what it is. Which outlines certain compliance to WTO regulations on labor and other items. And if you did comply to those regulations, you would be accorded duty-free status across certain lines in the trade agreement and market access that you have. Philippines has agreed to apply for GSP Plus, which is what they call it for Europe. And the GSP Plus now increases the lines for duty-free application from 2,200 to now 6,300, somewhere along, rounded off, it's the exact number, of which will be now be classified as duty-free, going in and back from Europe. A lot of those duty lines are in the areas of textile and garments, shoes, those types of products, so that it will be a definite plus for the Philippines in terms of being able to revive our textile and garments industry. So that's one. The second one is what we call the, you might have also read, so I'm not sure what you had read, the EU, Philippines EU FTA, Free Trade Agreement. So we are working on an EU FTA, similar to what South Korea and I believe, is it Vietnam? Angie, Vietnam? No, South Korea and Vietnam have South Korea and Singapore, I beg your pardon. South Korea and Singapore have signed with Europe, and basically it is a free trade agreement that is still being really worked out. There's been an application, there's been a desire by both countries to enlist that, a free trade agreement to get access, but that's also still being negotiated. And the third one is the EFTA, which is the areas outside of the EU, which are Luxembourg, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, I think, and one more, and Norway. The four other countries that were not included as part of the EU are also wanting to have a similar FTA, free trade agreement with the Philippines as it pertains to trade and to tariff. So duties and tariff. So most likely you read about the GSP Plus, which that's the most imminent one that is happening in Europe.
I'm Ramon Bunag. I'm an alumni member of CG College Milan. My question is, thank you, sir. How much minimum capital requirement is necessary for a foreign national to avail of the IPD or Investment Priorities Plan of the BOI?
The investment one, no? What is the minimum required? 1 billion? 3 million. What? I think 1 billion PPP. To get incentives. I think it's 3 million BOI. For the BOI it's 3 million, sir. For pesos. Pesos? Yeah. And for the PPP it's 1 billion and above, and you get investment priorities for the build operate for the public-private transport. I'll take 2 more questions. I don't want to eat up all the time.
Oh, I had a question.
This here. Yes, you have a check.
My name is CJ Hoxton with
Hi.
Saliva. How can U.S. companies participate in the infrastructure development of the Philippines, specifically in energy?
How? Well,
Yes.
energy, the BOI definitely has ways to help you have information, and you're talking to the right people here, because Ms. Director Angie Cayas, who's traveling with me, she's in charge of the international marketing department, and she will tell you exactly how you can participate and how you can organize business missions into the Philippines, exactly for that purpose. For the PPP, it is under the NEDA, or the executive director is Cosette Canilao. And Cosette Canilao, you can write her. I think they have a website also that you can apply. Yeah, and we can help you as well if you want to make any referrals to the PPP group, because PPP is under the direct supervision of the NEDA.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. One more over there. Yes. Last question, please.
I understand that foreigners can now lease properties in the Philippines for 80 years.
Excuse me.
I understand that foreigners can lease properties in the Philippines for 80 years.
I believe that you can lease property for 25 years to start with, and it's renewable for another 50 years. Or baliktad. 50 muna, tapos 25, then it's renewable for 25. Yes, sorry. So 75 years po. But your initial lease will be for 50, and then if you want to renew it, it's another 25. Okay? Okay. Maraming salamat po, and enjoy your day.